Without further ado, I'll tell you a little bit more about Peteroo Plus. Peteroo Plus generates artworks in immersive environments using modeling and rendering software, projection mapping, 3D printing, and machine learning. Through speculative fiction, Woo Plus's artwork investigates art estrangement associated with technological advancement and modernity. In 2020, he founded and created Epoch, which I was just discussing, which is an artist run virtual experiment that functions as an inclusive community building platform, inviting established and emerging artists working in both digital and analog mediums to participate. Being primarily artist centric, Epoch has established itself as a virtual destination that challenges the status quo with its critical and innovative approach to curation and exhibition building. In 2019, Woo Plus was awarded the COLA Individual Artist Fellowship and the Public Art Division Commission with Los Angeles World Airport's Arts Exhibition Program to be completed in 2022. He received his MFA from the San Francisco Art Institute and his BFA from the University of Windsor. Woo Plus lives and works in Los Angeles. And so here are, we're just going to take a 1-minute break. We're going to get set up on the back end because this talk is coming to you live, and Peter will be on with us in just a moment. Thanks for bearing with us, everybody. It's always fun to do virtual events. I'm here with Peter Woo Plus. Hey, Peter.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. Thanks to the Gray Area Festival for having me. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Should we just go ahead and do this?
Yeah, let's dive in. I'm really excited to, I'm going to kind of like chime in on your conversation, on your presentation, because I have a lot to say about Epoch. It's one of my favorite virtual projects that has emerged in the past few years. It's a deeply inspiring and super inclusive program that I can't believe and it's really taken a lot of stamina. I'll also mention, that Peter has been, I think, the first person to sell an entire exhibition as an NFT. Which is a really cool kind of historical milestone, and also helps us reimagine what distribution of funds and how purchasing and transacting can be intentional and support a whole community. So I'll shut up and let you talk now.
I just talk a little bit about myself. So I'm from a little town in Canada, 3,000 people, where my parents owned this Chinese restaurant. And I went to school. I did my grad studies at the San Francisco Institute, where I studied new genres, which basically means anything goes. But my focus was more in sculpture, new media, and installation. And then after graduating, I came to LA, where I took up a lot of jobs in the art industry, from working within galleries, being an art installer, being a teaching artist. And all those roles and the encounters of meeting all these people along the way was an accumulation of experiences which led to the formation of Epoch. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. So Epoch is an artist-run virtual experiment launched in the...
Hang on 1 second. We're not getting the screen share.
We're not getting the screen share.
No, there we go. We got it now.
If I do full screen, is it not coming out?
Perfect. We're good now.
Oh, we're good. Okay. So Epoch is an artist-run virtual experiment launched at the beginning of quarantine. The inability of museums and galleries to adapt to an online world was rendered evident upon the arrival of COVID-19, with many institutions attempting to recreate physical engagement through online viewing. Questions concerning the role of curation, materiality, and the museum itself have been raised. Epoch's unique approach to exhibition building seeks to address these issues by bridging reality with the virtual through critical and compelling presentations. With 9 exhibitions to date, featuring over 70 international, established, and emerging contemporary artists, the gallery seeks to create a new critical context to experience art while focusing on our mission to react to current social political situations. So the first image you're seeing here is the very first show, which is called End Demo. And at the beginning of quarantine, obviously all of us artists lost our exhibition opportunities. So I thought, and our jobs. So I just thought, oh, well, I have a little bit of time on my hands. Let's figure out how to do this. And I've always wanted to do a virtual gallery, but it didn't actually really make sense before the quarantine. And so this was kind of a way for me to kind of build a community and invite artists that I respect and love into this virtual environment. So this is situated on this really kind of bleached white island. And it's kind of reflecting what kind of the sentiments of what we're going through, this idea of isolation and ruins. So ruins is a big thing that I kind of go back to a lot. it's not necessarily dystopic or utopic, but just kind of a metaphor or an analogy of where we are in our current state. Surprisingly enough, no one wanted to be in this first show, but because I don't think that real people really understood what it was, and it was just kind of really foreign in itself. So I eventually asked a lot of my really close friends, and thank God they agreed to be in it, and because I think they really saw my previous work and they knew kind of what I was doing, and so they kind of entrusted their work in my hands, and I really appreciate them because it kind of like from this point really kind of blew up in a certain way. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of my exhibitions that I've done, but what I'm going to be focusing on more is the shows where I'm taking actual sites and then kind of bringing them to the virtual world. I kind of believe that tethering something that is in the real world and bringing it to the virtual world kind of can talk about the things that are critically happening in the world, and we can kind of like go back and forth. I try not to go too much in fantasy when I'm doing these shows, and I kind of try to keep it to some sort of kind of realism, but it, of course, is a virtual world, so there's a certain fantasy involved. So this picture is the demolished Amundsen building in Los Angeles. So it's the LACMA Amundsen building. And so when this was happening, it was kind of very controversial because it was getting replaced by this other building by a Swiss architect named Peter Zumthor. And so I thought to create it as a virtual show. So I rebuilt the Amundsen building from scratch, and then I demolished it and tried to kind of match it up pretty as close as I possibly can. And I curated 9 or 10 artists in this exhibition. I think 90% of them were Latinx and from Los Angeles. And it kind of just me talking about the idea of the fragility of the institution itself. This piece is by Caetano Ferreira. So what he did, he had access, he got I think a LACMA Art and Tech grant. So he was able to actually source actual pieces from the museum when it was getting destroyed, and then he 3D scanned them, and then we placed them into this environment. So there's kind of this weird meta duality thing happening. This is a work by Mario Ybarra Jr., and he went out into his neighborhood in Los Angeles and found the oldest building in his neighborhood. And this is an ammunition bunker. I think it was in the 1760s. So what he did was he took a drone and took a lot of images around it, and then we photogrammetried it and placed it into the space. So this work is, this show is called Wonderland, and it's based off this site in China where China tried to build their own Disney-like theme park. But and they tried to call it Wonderland, but they lost funding, and so all that stands now is this castle, and the kind of the farmers reclaimed the land and whatnot. And so I thought to kind of recreate this site and place artists within the site. So I just saw pictures online. I didn't have any blueprints, so then I just remodeled the site from pictures as close as I possibly can, and place works within it. Now, this show is quite personal for me because it was launched at the time when there was a lot of backlash against Chinese Americans. So I curated a show about Chinese Americans, but Chinese artists that are from the diaspora. So let me see. Okay, so this is a work by Zizang Wu, and he's based in, I think he was based in New York, but he goes back to Hong Kong also. And he placed all these, this is from a video that he's done, and so he took models from his videos and then placed them in this environment. And obviously they're hospital beds, and so it's quite uncanny to actually jump into a hospital bed and experience it from that view. So it was interesting doing this show because when I'm curating, I'm I'm really allowing a lot of agency for the artists to do what they want. So when the people came and sent the works in, it was like everything was really dark and macabre for this show, and I didn't ask for anything, so it kind of really captured, I think, the sentiment of what was happening. This is a work by Sydney Shen. She's based out of New York, and these are shame fiddles, which were, I think, used in the Middle Ages. And so what she did was these are actually physical objects, so we had to recreate them and model them digitally. And so they have also these marbles. So you put your head in your hand. So if you did something bad, you're in the shame fiddle, and then you have to like move around and get this marble through. And it's a game that she kind of created out of this kind of ridiculous act. Usually I don't put my own work in the shows, but I think that this was exceptionally touching and a poignant show for me. And so I did this neon sign that flashes between the words assimilation and annihilation. And this is by my father's handwriting. And so it's kind of just talking about the assimilation that Asian Americans kind of go through to try to fit into a culture that is not your own. And with this assimilation is you kind of lose your whole cultural heritage in a certain way. So and so we kind of, it's like a break into what our backgrounds are. So we're kind of disconnected, and we don't have places. So Chinese or any Asian diaspora, we have sometimes a lack of connection between where we're from and where we are now, and it's hard to call home. What is home? We don't really know what home is in a certain extent. So this is the second to last show. This is called Freeport, and this is modeled after the actual Luxembourg Freeport. And so online there was the blueprints and elevations of the actual Freeport. So fortunately I got those, and then I modeled it pretty much to spec. So when you're actually going through the virtual space, you're actually experiencing what it would be like to be inside the actual Freeport. Now, what I'm doing here is, this is the first time I'm releasing it in NFT. So at this time, well, before this, I was just doing everything altruistically, and I wasn't planning to make money, and I just really kind of wanted to make cool exhibitions and have a lot of great artists to show within them. But when the NFT thing rolled around earlier this year, a lot of artists approached me and said that I was kind of poised to do this, so I should figure out how to do this, and that's what I did. And I thought it would be a perfect show to have it within a Freeport, because there's a lot of similarities between Freeports and NFTs, where they are both in unregulated territories. They're constructs of capitalism, and they can elicit unsavory practices like tax evasion and whatnot. But with a touch of irony, we sought to kind of circumvent these similarities by offering a holistic approach to an NFT built on ecological, equitable, and sustainable models. So this is actually what the Freeport looks like. And this is the interior of the Freeport modeled. And this is what it actually looks like again. So let me just go back to this image because it's hard to stare at the other one. So with this model, what I wanted to do with the NFT was that I didn't want to mint individual works, and I thought what was missing within the current climate of this whole marketplace and everything, all these things going on, is that there was just so much glut going on and speculation that I kind of didn't want to play into any of that. So what I decided to do, well, a lot of these odd things that you see online, a lot of the GIFs and stuff, there's no context. And I always thought, well, Epoch has context in spades, because that's essentially what I'm doing, is building context for these artworks to exist in, apart from this neutral white wall. And I chose to mint the entire exhibition. So as an NFT, you are getting the whole exhibition as a standalone app and full 8K and high-res audio and whatnot. And yeah, So this is a work by Neo Balufa. So this is within this kind of storage area situation, and these are talking paintings, and they're kind of talking about their existence as NFTs and within the Freeport and whatnot. This is Juan Cavelli, and this is quite an amazing installation that we all worked together to put together, and there's a great video that kind of accompanies this. And so you can go through, then you can go upstairs through the Freeport, and you can see works by Alice Bucknell. Alice Bucknell was one of the first artists that I wanted to get for this show because she was really against NFTs on the, I kind of the model that I was introducing, which was more of an equitable and sustainable model in ecological. So instead of Ethereum, I chose to go with Algorand, which is a POS blockchain, which is 99.9% less impactful on the environment. And equitable is, this is the first time that this has been done also, is that I created a smart contract which splits the profits between all the participating artists and the galleries. So 70% of each sale for the NFT goes directly into the participating artist's wallet. 30% remains to the gallery. 20% royalties are established for the secondary market. And after the end of the show, all the artists get an AP edition of the exhibition themselves to kind of hold value, and then they can do what they want with it afterwards. So after telling Alice all about this, she was really excited to be within the show, and I really thank her for being there. This is a work by Harad Saab, and he really went through and modeled this whole situation in this room, and he's quite talented at what he does. And it's there's a quite funny tidbit in this, is that you can go further in the space, and if you turn around, you can see the back of the paintings, or these facades of paintings, which are just essentially cardboard texture. No one really knows that, but yeah. So this is just, I've talked about this already. So this is my current exhibition that just was released maybe 2.5 weeks ago, and it has a great list of artists. Keiken and Qian Yi and Thierry Riboneau are also in the show, but also we're speaking on the panel for Great Arts as a Festival, and they are in the New Art City exhibition Diorama, which Wade curated. So this is the most pop show I've ever done, and the NFT will be released on October 29th. So this show I modeled, so this is an odd thing. So it's super meta. So I'm working kind of with this gallery in Hong Kong called Wow Gallery. Well, actually, there's 2 curators that asked me to be in the show, and then they wanted their whole artist roster in the show, and I kind of didn't want to do that because I didn't want to kind of show. There's a lot of difficulties. A lot of the things were flat works, and I didn't want to. I don't think a lot of time flat works the best in virtual environments. So I asked for full creative control, and so I got to curate the show myself and kind of create the environment. So the environment is based off the Wow Gallery street. So this is actually the Wow Gallery. This is exactly kind of what it looks like. And the surrounding street with all the buildings I modeled also. So this exhibition will also be shown in the Wow Gallery within a group show on the 29th. So I'm hoping when people see the show and then they walk out and they're like, wow, there's some really crazy meta things going on here. This is a work by Dr. Wu. He's a tattoo artist. So this is kind of one of also the first shows I thought to kind of expand from not just showing artists, but maybe designers and other people that are working in the creative industry, and seeing how that would go. And we created this environment for him, and I think it looks pretty good. So this is another view of the street. At the end here, you see Tierra and Qian's work. And this version is also in the New Art City Diorama show. And they have other things like videos and other sculptures that are within that. So I think they may have talked it within this talk, but there's this piece called AAG, which is referencing to this cable that travels through the Pacific Ocean. And so when they approached me about the show, they wanted me to bring the Pacific Ocean to the city, and I was like, absolutely, let's do it, because they were really thinking that the ocean was bringing all these types of places together, like Los Angeles, which Chen Chen and I are based in, and Tierra was based in Honolulu at the time, and then we're talking about Hong Kong, which is obviously the Pacific Ocean connects all of us together. This work is by Gordon Chung, so these are recreated after his Windows series, and in the real life, they're kind of made out of wood, and they have these kind of newspaper wrappings around them and stuff like that. So we try to match it as accurately as we can, and kind of did the installation. Now, obviously, the show is it's called Replicant, so it is based off Blade Runner in a certain way. It's like more like an homage in a certain way. But in the background here, the walls, you can see the files that are actually from Decker's apartment from the Innes building originally. This is a work by Jennifer West. Her work will also be shown at the WOW Gallery physically. And these are kind of, she picks up objects from the LA River and kind of places them over these screens and does these film treatments over top of them and whatnot. And we thought it would be interesting to put it into this kind of decrepit garage that's kind of underwater also, and kind of away from the street. This is Kakin's work. So she's also in the New Art City Diorama show. And so this is really a high-res sculpture that they provided, and we placed it in the city. And I actually built this surrounding back city and lit it really differently to kind of work with their piece in the back. Oops. That's come out. And so this is another work by Jennifer West, and this is a skyscraper piece. And it's a video. You can go online, and it's best to see it on your laptop so you can experience the whole situation. And actually, the soundtrack is done by my friend Conrad Black, who also did the Balenciaga virtual campaign recently. So he was obviously really into Blade Runner, and he agreed to do it. And it sounds amazing. It's really quite emotional going through it. Okay, I think that's it for my slides. But that's just a quick overview of what I do. And hello, is anybody there? Wade? There.
I'm here.
And so that's just a quick overview of what of things I've done so far, and you can just go online and see them. And if anybody has questions, then we can talk about it.
Amazing. Thank you for such an in-depth tour through the recent history of the gallery.
Yeah.
It's what I love about the show is, and this is the way that, and what I think is really clever about the way that you use the wayfinding, technically, is that in New Art City it's free movement, and because of that, because of the way the images are loaded, we're a lot more constricted by what we can do, what kinds of files we can use. Whereas you get these beautiful, extremely high resolution renders to just load what feels like almost instantly. And it is really an and it loads beautifully on mobile. It's such an accessible way to show work.
Yeah, when I first did the show, actually everything was animated, but it wouldn't load on the internet because it was just taking too much bandwidth, because it was 360 videos. So right now essentially you're moving through 360 panoramas. But what I noticed is that because I really wanted the moving water and the sound of the water, but funny enough, when you just added the sound of the water, people forgot that the water wasn't moving. So that was an interesting thing to learn. And by using the point and click system, which I chose, obviously, yes, I can use higher res images and really utilize the whole CGI models and textures and everything. But it's also, it allows me to kind of treat this cinematically, where I'm leading the person through each piece, and it kind of builds a story, so I kind of see it in more cinematically in a certain way.
And I think that I love because something that, I love to explore virtual worlds. It's a really, prominent, the central aspect of my own research practice and interest. And I always really appreciate virtual worlds where the space is framed for the viewer. It's made to be seen. It's not just
Yeah.
something that's been created to fulfill a function of the mechanics of the game. It's something that, or of the world, or whatever else. It's something that's framed to be something that is both immersive and that you are embodied in, but also that you can look at in a way that gives you this really particular kind of vision that just, like, while at one hand kind of removes you, but on the other hand sucks you in so much deeper.
Hmm.
And each of the like every time and I think that that's, the way that you install the show is so clever in the way that you move through these different spaces, and it's framed beautifully every time you click to another point. It's so
Yeah.
intentional what you're looking
Yes.
at,
Very
how you move
intentional.
through it, and you
And
feel that intention, and it's awesome. It's like you're being taken on a hand led tour, and it's
yeah,
very connected.
that's yeah, just leading it through, and the point and click system really allows me to do that, and building up that experiences where there are things that can be discovered, and you can get lost in these certain things too, but it always kind of leads you back in a certain way. And
Mm.
on you can also experience them on with a Google Cardboard on your phone, so you can do that. Or but if you get the NFT, then you can use it with Oculus or whatever not. So it's set up to do all that stuff. Um, yeah. So.
That's amazing. Oh, I didn't realize that. That's
Mhm.
so cool. I mean, it's interesting. So I would love to dig in a little bit more into what the experience of working in the NFT marketplace has been like for you. This is a
Yeah.
it's a highly volatile space in the sense that
Hmm.
we have proponents and opponents kind of
Hmm.
like having very polarized views. We have all different kinds of artists who are engaging with this marketplace in very different ways.
Hmm.
And each marketplace itself, I know that your shows are sold on via Algorand, and we have very different communities that are transacting in ETH versus Bitcoin versus Tezos,
Hmm.
and et cetera, et cetera. So how did you kind of navigate that world? And I know you spoke a
Hmm.
little bit about this in your presentation, but I'd love to learn more about why and like how it was important for your artists to do that and participate in this
Um,
marketplace.
so when all this came around, it was basically 2 or 3 months trying to figure out how to launch the show and with the NFT. And I didn't want to participate on a marketplace because of the idea of the speculation attached to it and the glut just in itself. And I didn't want a lot of the work to be shown a lot next to say some weird cat gif or something like that. So there was a certain control in the integrity of it. So I chose to create the ability to buy it directly off my site. So and all the things that I've done is all open source. So the smart contract is open source. The button is open source. So essentially, anybody that has the kind of the knowledge of how to interact with the blockchain that could use that stuff to kind of build that themselves. So I'm pretty open about helping people do that, and I really want other people to kind of explore and galleries to explore these kinds of options. Yeah, but the smart contract with Ethereum, I did obviously didn't want to be Ethereum because it was ecologically damaging, and we didn't know when it was going to switch over to 2.0. But and I did a lot of research, and I found that Algorand was one of the more emerging ones, and it has a really really strong backbone, and a lot of people are developing on it more so than Tezos and more so than anything else. And there's like, and the transaction fees are basically zero, which is zero. It's 0.001 per transaction, and it's really really fast and whatnot. So I chose Algorand as and the community is really quite amazing. I mean, every blockchain has their own certain kind of community, and you see that with Tezos and whatnot. But because I don't think we're on Ethereum, it's more tight knit because everybody just wants to help each other. So I have been in communication with a lot of marketplaces that have been really wanting to show the work, but me trying to figure out how my smart contract, which would work with that, because my smart contract is quite something that's hasn't not been done before, so it's hard to kind of place them into the marketplace because of the variables that I've made. But I will be making. I'm getting a lot of funding soon, so I will be creating a mini DEX which people can be able to trade the things on directly off the site. So
That's awesome. I mean,
yeah,
I think
with
that,
the help, yeah.
I mean, in thinking through like the theme of the festival, worlding protocol, how do we look at the world? How do we look at it as interconnected? How do we change some of the damaging protocols and participate in meaningful ways that don't constrain us to the kinds of scripts that have been written for us, as we were just talking about with
Yeah.
Wendy a few minutes ago. And I just think it's so inspiring that you wrote your own protocol. You decided, hey, I'm
Yeah.
going to participate in this, but I'm going to do it on my own terms and in my own way.
Well, it's a lot, you know, a lot of the projects I do are very subversive and kind of challenge the art world itself and the model that was kind of imposed upon us. And being an artist of color, it's really, you kind of realize after that world isn't for us. So I figured this is an opportunity to kind of build our own world and build our own economic system that helps and supports each other. So the smart contract that I did was very communal and it's equitable, and essentially they're part owner of the piece, you know, because their name is part of the NFT. So in blockchain really kind of in a way is giving you everybody the ability, if you really want to figure it out, to be able to build your own economies and build your own communities and your support systems, and you don't have to no longer be beholden to these marketplaces or the art world itself and how it functions. So funny enough, like when I released the NFT and it's done relatively well, sold 3 out of the 5, and after that, all these galleries have been trying to hit me up and trying to figure out how to do this. And I'm just like, well, do you know what blockchain is? And sometimes they're like, well, we don't really know what that is. I'm like, well, don't try to build something on your own site if you don't know what that is to begin with. And I'm not really here to kind of walk you through and teach you. And I don't really want to work with anybody that, especially a gallery that's just there for the money grab. Now, there's some other galleries that approach me, and they're way more about wanting to build a community and about like going into a different direction that opposes the art system, which has been around for 100 years. And they're kind of worried. I feel like they're trying to get on board, but they don't know how. But they're kind of really worried about what this means for them, because the whole system is changing, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I also really appreciate, this act that you did of, writing your own protocol, because I think that what I've been seeing, not in every case, there's so many fabulous things happening in the crypto community, but in certain aspects, I'm seeing damaging systems that have been in place being concretized, reconstructed, repackaged, and shilled as something different, kind of all under this guise of like a utopian future, when it's, it's all based on extractive consumption at the end of the day. And so, I've been my biggest qualm is the nomenclature, I think, in a lot of ways, and and like how the conversation it develops, because I think that that's where, I want people to call a spade, like in order to understand the world, in order to build it better, we have to look at it for what it is and not be bogged down by an illusion or by a popular narrative. And I appreciate you cutting through that noise in so many ways with this show. And also, just the idea of, in my view of a more perfect ecosystem, the artist proof is quintessential. And the fact that each of these NFT exhibitions, each artist gets that stake in it. So even before you sell a single edition and dividends or, split amongst however that is going to work, each artist has value just in simply holding that token.
Absolutely.
That also makes the artist a co-conservator, a co-collaborator, it really enmeshes them into the work and into the value that's created in a way that feels so much more egalitarian.
And it's not just me. I wish I could take credit for thinking about all this, but it's really having conversations with a lot of different artists, like Catano Ferreira, he was really helpful in figuring out the smart contract and how it kind of breaks up, and talking about the idea of equity because he's really into that. And and it's a lot of conversations of what people want and what they want to see in the art world, you know, and through that is how I decided to kind of go about doing what I do. So and I think, you know, this whole community aspect, and you know, yes, I add a plus on my last name. I think it's really, I added it at a certain time when I was working with AI, and I realized that this thing could do sometimes things better than I can. It could write better than I can. It can sometimes make a painting better than I can. And so I added that because I realized that the future is not just me. And then when Epoch came around, then it made more sense that it wasn't just me. And I usually don't add my name to any of the exhibitions or anything. I kind of like it to be existing on its own kind of terms without, maybe that's an identity thing that I have trauma over. But anyways, but it's about the community, and it's about supporting the artists and trying to figure out different kind of systems to, and yeah, it works, but it's also in a way subversive, and it's trying to question what the current system is and how we could do it better. Now, I wouldn't say it's called utopic, because I don't really believe in utopia in a certain aspect, but it's an attempt to do something else. So.
Oh, totally. And I think that's so important. It's, you know, we've been talking so much about imagining alternative futures. You know, then Maury in one of the opening talks was talking about how it's quintessential that we dream at this moment, because without dreaming, we can't actualize something that it needs to be, that would be so much more wholesome and generative and regenerative in so many ways. You know, you've mentioned the community a bunch, and, you know, I think that what you have done is fabulously well as well is bring a community around this gallery, bring communities of artists together. You can feel how strongly the works are in dialogue with each other in each show. How do you go about doing that? And what's your kind of, you know, how do you approach this idea of creating community through the curatorial work that you're doing?
So a lot of the program, and 90% of it or more, is women, queer, trans, and artists of color. That's basically the focus that I wanted to go with. But just curatorial, and I don't really even call myself a curator that much because I don't write anything. So in a certain way, a lot of people who are in the press ask me for press releases, and I say, well, I don't write press releases, but, you know, this is what the show is about, and if you want to write something about it, I really love to hear what you're going to write. And they actually come back and write something really amazing, which is quite extraordinary. It's not a shelled out, repeated press release. And I do appreciate the support that I've gotten through that, because it's been quite fabulous. But for curation wise, I usually start off with an artist or two I have in mind, and I have a list of artists that I want to work with in the future. And I kind of think about what the show is going to be and the environment it's going to be in, and then kind of working within the environment at the same time takes shape. So sometimes the environment isn't always there, and sometimes I have input with the artist. So I really work closely with them, and then everything kind of comes together. So yeah, and then after I choose a couple artists and talk to them, and then I kind of branch out like a web and see who else could have an interesting conversation with their works and within the show too. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not like you are, especially very, very historical and curatorial, whereas I think it's a different approach.
Hey, there's space for all of us here, and there's no way that's the right way. I think, you know, what we do is make connections between different people and see what grows from, you know, watering the seed a little bit. That's, you know, kind of how I think about this. And, you know, hopefully through that, you know, care and watering and kind of like tending to our little cabbage patch, that, you know, we that something really beautiful can bloom out of that. And
Yeah.
that work is not done by you or I. That work is done by the artist, and what kinds of collisions make sparks, basically.
Yeah. And if we're talking about collisions, the reason why Epoch has gotten to the where it is, if you're seeing it from the first image I showed of the island to now, it's because each artist is bringing me something that's really challenging to do. So each time I'm learning something else that I can actually place into the next show or in the current show, and so it's an evolution of experiences again, where it's getting it to this point. So each time I'm getting more knowledge and working with them, because they always bring something that's like, I don't know how to do that, but let's try to figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting experience. And I think for artists themselves, especially, I don't usually, I mean, maybe right now 70% are digitally based, but maybe 30% have no experience in it. So in the digital world. So I usually help them kind of walk them through what is the possibilities. And so when you approach an artist that is usually an analog artist for the digital space and helping them through that and trying to get their vision across, they're realizing that there's no constrictions to monetary scale or physics itself. And so it kind of expands their practice. So a lot of them have come back to me and said, wow, this has really helped me think in a different ways about my work. And then that just means a lot to me, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh no, that's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
My specialty and my focus is really the online exhibition format. That's what I am uniquely interested in, and how we can share rich phenomenologies through the screen that don't feel like flattened experiences, that are native environments for the artwork that is on display. There's such a long history in digital art curation, new media art, of like the bad translation of something that's taken off screen into the physical world and rendered anodyne, or just malfunctioning and just out out of context. So like that to me is you were speaking about this earlier, like that's the part to me that's the most cogent about what you're doing, is that you are building native environments for the work. You are giving them a context where there isn't one. And that's something that, again, I make NFTs, I buy NFTs. I've been participating a lot in that community, but my biggest qualm with the way that we experience NFTs is that they're totally out of context, that they're floating around the internet, a link on OpenSea here, a portal to a storefront on Super Rare there. And it feels like you might even have a selection of works, but then it's just a scroll, and then it becomes another algorithmically determined thing that we encounter. And so to approach this project, and to a project that is rooted in experience first, like the buying of the NFT comes after you've gone into the show and you fall in love with the worlds. I mean, the Replicant show is so much fun. I mean, we did a little tour the other night, and we were going through the different spaces. There are the really intricacies of some of the elaborate tunnels you can kind of go down in Replicant.
And in this show, there's a lot of subtleties. There's some, Hong Kong had a lot of protests. So there's a lot of things that are hidden with this. So it's within hiding it and seeing if you can get away with showing it in Hong Kong too. And I hope they don't see this. But, there, in every work, in every show that I do, there are a lot of metaphors that I add. And actually, each show has an Easter egg too, or one or two. So there are things that are hidden, which nobody has really found yet. But it's interesting that, I like that idea of having it. I think the idea of like the why when I first did the Endema show, people were like, well, is it going to be the same thing the next show? And I'm like, no, it's going to be a totally different environment. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm going to build out every single time a different environment, because this whole like idea of like having something fixed never made sense to me. You know what I'm saying? So just being a person of color and people thinking I'm a certain way, I think I'm trying to do that itself. So I think like everything I'm doing is as kind of a reflection of what I believe that should be in the world. And that, because I used to do web design too in a certain way. So like logo like design was like the hardest thing for me because I didn't understand in my brain why something had to be so permanent, or like a tattoo even for me. I can't do it because it's like that's just too permanent, and I'm constantly changing, and so I thought that, well, let's make like something like a gallery of virtual space that's like kind of like a bouncing ball, which can talk about certain aspects because of the context and the things that I put into it, so it can kind of reflect the world that we're living through. And so if you look at the history of Epoch, it's kind of an analogy to all the things that would happen to us in the last year and a half. And it's kind of interesting to see just the time spans of each show, and what the things that I'm trying to talk about. So yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to see what you have coming up for us next. There's so many
Oh,
exciting things
I
that,
can I
that
can talk. I think I could talk about that one.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So uh, surprisingly enough, because I did the LACMA show, which was called Phantom Limb, the one that you saw with the demolished Amundsen building, and I thought they hated me because I went after the institution, and it's weird. Every show that I get, I usually get like three or more pieces of press, but it's funny that nobody wanted to write about that show, and I think it's because no one wanted to go against the man. But when the Freeport show released, and we had the artist Sarah Rosalina Brady in the show, which she got an Art and Tech recipient grant, she showed it to the head of LACMA's Art and Tech department, Joel Ferrari, and he approached me, and we had coffee and stuff like that. And I told him about Algorand and what I was doing, and he was like, "This is amazing. I would love to work with you." So we are now collaborating a show with LACMA in 2022, early 2022, and yeah, they're fully funding the show, and they're giving me complete creative control because they were also the curators there. They were all like, we don't want to force him to do something on our terms. Let him do whatever the thing he wants to do. So I'll be curating maybe 10 or so artists from their previous and current art and tech recipients within that show. And I'm not going to talk about the theme yet, but it's kind of, I don't know if it's going to pass, but it's pretty messed up, but not that messed up.
Well, I appreciate you pushing the envelope because I think
Yeah,
this is really important, particularly with institutions. And,
yeah,
obviously institutions have their problems, but I do have to say that it is so incredible to see this work be recognized by an institution like the LACMA, because
yeah,
I think that it, however you want to argue this, it does give it this kind of, historical framing. It gives so much visibility. It obviously gives funding and support, and it also adds a level of legitimacy in saying that, okay, like, even if whether we agree with this, what with X, Y, or Z institution, doesn't, whether we agree with them or not, like, the fact that they're recognizing this work and seeing it as what's important, and where the money should be going and where the attention should be focused, just showcases how crucial this work is. When we've known that, but maybe
Mhm.
more people will start to take the memo.
So I'm very cautious about who I work with and stuff. A lot of other institutions have approached me. A lot of them just wanted me to recreate their spaces, and I'm just like, well, I'm not. You can just get a web designer or get Matterport to scan the place. You don't need me. I have a special, different set of skills, and but a lot of ways, if you let me do the, you know, think about what it is that we should be doing and how we can talk about things critically, then it's interesting that I could come up with certain things. But it's interesting working with a gallery and institutions because I've done shows where I'm just been doing it myself and thinking about things. But I thought, how do we expand to kind of work with these kind of other type of systems that are really kind of maybe stuck in the art world, and how, because I know the thing that I can offer, so I'm appreciative that they see that. But it's also very difficult working with them a lot of time because obviously there's a lot of red tape, a lot of things that they want to be done, a lot of things that they don't want to have their name on. But it's like, and I only choose projects where I have complete kind of creative control over the thing, and then I can choose the artist, and that things aren't really shoved down my throat or whatever not. So that,
On your own terms.
yeah, minor terms.
I think that I think that that's a great place to leave us today. We're just out of time,
Okay.
and I think that that's really important, is to not just accept the scripts that are handed to you, not
Hmm.
look at the protocol that is defining what is happening to you or how you need to work, but rather saying, okay, like, I have space here, I have agency here, despite any constrictions that are put in place. And this is what I can do, this is what I can achieve, and this is the stamp that, uh, is most aligned with my beliefs and my
Hmm.
work practice and all of these different things. So it's a really, that's some really wonderful insight, Peter. And just congratulations again on the LACMA thing, and congratulations on
Yeah.
Replicant Show. It's absolutely stunning. Everyone, please go and check it out. If you can find the secret Easter egg in the Replicant Show, you will find the Gray Area Show linked there, but it's a toughie. You're going to have to really do some scouring.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if you go directly to the New Art City Show, there's a wonderful portal that leads directly into the Replicant Show.
Yeah.
Please go and check that out.
Thank you, Wade. Thank you, Gray Area, for having me. And everybody wants to reach me on DM through Instagram. Feel free to. I'm always here to talk about stuff and share ideas.
That's so generous of you, Peter. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.